The Horizon Airlines flight from Chicago to Seattle sliced through the night sky, its engines a steady rumble beneath the soft glow of the first-class cabin. 30 minutes after takeoff, at 35,000 feet above the patchwork fields of Wisconsin, Maya Brooks sat in seat 3A, cradling her 6-month-old son, Elijah, against her chest. Her dark skin shimmered under the overhead lights, a quiet elegance in her posture, despite the exhaustion etched into her face. She'd saved for months to afford this seat, a rare treat for a single flight with her husband's airline, hoping for a moment of peace after a grueling week. Elijah stirred, his tiny hands clutching her blouse, his soft coos barely audible over the hum of the plane. Around her, passengers sipped wine or scrolled on tablets, their murmurs blending into a dull symphony of privilege. Then came Lillian Hayes. The head flight attendant stormed down the aisle, her navy uniform crisp as a blade, blonde hair pulled tight into a bun that screamed authority. Her pale blue eyes narrowed as they landed on Maya, a flicker of disdain curling her lips. Lillian was 42, a veteran of the skies with a reputation for keeping first-class pristine, her domain, her kingdom. To her, Maya didn't fit, a black woman with a baby, an intruder in a space meant for the elite. Elijah let out a faint whimper, a sound so small it could have been lost in the cabin's white noise. But Lillian seized on it like a predator, scenting blood. "Keep that kid quiet," she snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. Maya looked up, startled, her hand instinctively smoothing Elijah's curls. "He's just a baby," she said softly, her tone calm but firm. "He's not bothering anyone." Lillian's sneer deepened, her manicured hand twitching as if itching to strike. "People like you don't belong up here," she spat, the words dripping with venom, each syllable a dagger aimed at Maya's very existence. Before Maya could respond, Lillian's hand lashed out, a sharp slap cracking across Maya's cheek. The sound echoed, a gunshot in the stunned silence that followed. Maya's head snapped to the side, her skin blazing red, the sting radiating through her jaw like wildfire. Elijah wailed, his cries piercing the air as passengers froze, jaws dropping, wine glasses hovering mid-sip. A businessman in a gray suit 2 rows back gaped, his tablet slipping to his tray table with a clatter. A young woman with braids, Tasha Green, a nurse on her way to Seattle, fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she hit record. Maya's deep brown eyes locked onto Lillian's, unyielding, refusing to let tears spill despite the throbbing pain. She wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction. Then a deep voice boomed over the intercom, slicing through the tension like thunder. "Lillian Hayes, you're finished." It was James Carter, Maya's husband, the CEO of Horizon Airlines, his tone steady and lethal. The cabin erupted into gasps, heads swiveling toward the speakers embedded in the ceiling. Lillian's smirk vanished in an instant, her pale face twisting into a mask of disbelief as James Carter's voice reverberated through the cabin. Her kingdom of first class, built on rigid lines of who belonged and who didn't, teetered on the edge of collapse. She laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound that rang hollow against the stunned silence. "That's ridiculous," she said loudly, waving a dismissive hand, her manicured nails glinting under the lights. "Some passenger playing a prank." She turned to stride back toward the galley, her heels clicking with forced confidence on the carpeted floor, as if she could outrun the weight of that voice. But before she took 3 steps, the intercom crackled again, this time with the captain's baritone cutting through like a blade. "Lillian Hayes, this is Captain Reynolds." That was James Carter. "Report to the galley immediately." The cabin exploded into a flurry of whispers and gasps. The businessman in the gray suit dropped his wine glass, the red liquid splashing across his tray table as he muttered, "Did he say CEO?" Tasha Green, her braids swaying as she leaned forward, angled her phone to catch Lillian's retreat, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and vindication. Passengers craned their necks, some smirking, others glaring, their phones now a forest of lenses trained on the unfolding drama. Lillian froze mid-step, her shoulders stiffening as reality sank in like ice water. She spun around, her gaze darting across the rows, searching for a lifeline, a sign this was a mistake. It landed on Maya again, who met it with that same unshakable calm, rocking Elijah gently as if the slap had been a mere breeze. Lillian's lips parted, but no words came. Her authority was crumbling, and she could feel every pair of eyes boring into her. Captain Reynolds emerged from the cockpit, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and a no-nonsense stare. His polished shoes thudded against the floor as he marched down the aisle, stopping beside Lillian. "Now," he said, his voice low but unyielding, leaving no room for defiance. Lillian's jaw tightened, her cheeks flushing crimson as she realized the passengers were watching her every flinch. She forced a tight smile, a desperate bid to salvage her dignity, and followed him, her steps stiff and mechanical. As she passed Maya's seat, she couldn't resist a final venomous jab, her voice a hiss too quiet for the captain to catch, but loud enough for Maya. "You think you've won, you little—" She trailed off, muttering a racial slur under her breath. The word a poison dart meant to pierce Maya's composure. Maya's fingers tightened around Elijah, her nails digging into her palms, but her face remained a fortress. She wouldn't let Lillian see the fury simmering beneath her skin, the rage at being reduced to a stereotype in front of strangers. The galley curtain swished shut behind Lillian, muffling her sharp protests, but the tension in the cabin hung thick, a storm cloud ready to burst. Tasha leaned toward Maya, her voice soft but urgent. "You okay?" Maya nodded, her lips curving into a faint, tired smile. "I've had worse," she whispered, her eyes flickering toward the galley, where Lillian's world was about to unravel. The first-class cabin of the Horizon Airlines flight from Chicago to Seattle buzzed with a restless hum, 40 minutes from touchdown at SeaTac. The engines droned steadily at 35,000 feet, slicing through the night sky above Idaho's rugged terrain, but inside the air crackled with tension. Maya Brooks sat in seat 3A, her cheeks still pulsing with heat from Lillian Hayes' slap, a dull ache throbbing in time with her heartbeat. She cradled her 6-month-old son, Elijah, against her chest, his tiny breaths a faint rhythm against the chaos that had erupted moments ago. Her deep brown eyes stared out the window, watching clouds twist like smoke against the endless black. Her mind replaying James Carter's voice over the intercom, her husband, her shield, the CEO who just stripped Lillian of her wings mid-flight. She'd won, hadn't she? Yet something gnawed at her gut, a whisper of unease she couldn't shake. Behind the thick blue curtain of the galley, Lillian paced like a caged animal, her heels scuffing the linoleum floor. Her blonde bun had loosened, strands clinging to her sweat-dampened forehead, her navy uniform wrinkled from the fury of her movements. Captain Reynolds stood before her, his broad frame filling the narrow space, his salt and pepper beard catching the faint glow of the overhead bulb. "You're suspended, Lillian," he said, his voice a low growl, steady but sharp. "Conduct unbecoming. You struck a passenger, James Carter's wife no less. You're off this flight the second we land." The words hit her like a slap of her own, her pale hands clenching into fists at her sides. Suspended, not fired, not yet, but a public stripping of her authority, her wings yanked away mid-flight. The cabin beyond the curtain buzzed with a new energy, passengers still reeling from James's bombshell, their whispers escalating into a chaotic hum. Lillian's mind raced, her breath coming in short, angry bursts. She glared at Reynolds, her voice rising, brittle and sharp. "This is insane. That woman doesn't belong in first class. Baby or not, I was doing my job, keeping order." Reynolds' jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. "Your job doesn't include assault, Lillian. James Carter's on the line right now, and he's promising further action. You're lucky I'm not locking you in the jump seat." Her stomach twisted, but she forced a scoff, her arrogance a flimsy shield. "Further action? He's bluffing. She's just some nobody with a rich husband." The captain didn't respond. He turned, brushing past the curtain, leaving her alone with her fury. She yanked her phone from her apron pocket, her fingers trembling as she typed a frantic message to Nora Fields, her old friend and former flight attendant. "Suspended mid-flight over that black chick. They say she's Carter's wife. Total setup. Spread it. Make her the villain." She hit send, her pulse hammering in her ears. Back in the cabin, Tasha Green, the young nurse with braids, leaned across the aisle toward Maya, her voice warm with concern. "You holding up?" Maya offered a small nod, her lips twitching into a tired smile as she adjusted Elijah's blanket. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm okay. We're okay." A junior flight attendant named Sarah Kim approached Maya, her movements hesitant, her freckled face flushed with nerves. She carried a folded blanket and a bottle of water, her dark eyes darting toward the galley curtain before settling on Maya. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry about everything," she said, her voice soft but earnest. "Here, for you and the little one." She handed over the items, her hands lingering, as if she wanted to say more. Maya took the blanket, draping it over Elijah's tiny frame, and met Sarah's gaze. "It's not your fault," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I'm okay. We're okay." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her, and stepped back, disappearing down the aisle to tend to other passengers. Maya leaned back in her seat, the leather creaking beneath her, and let out a slow breath. The support from Tasha and Sarah felt like a fleeting balm, a fragile victory settling in her chest. Lillian was suspended, humiliated, out of sight behind that curtain. James had her back, his voice a thunderclap that had shaken Lillian's world. She whispered to Elijah, her voice barely audible over the engine hum. "We're safe now, baby. She's gone." But then it happened. A faint ping sounded from Tasha's phone in 4B. She glanced at the screen, her eyes widening, and leaned toward Maya again, her voice urgent. "You need to see this." She turned the phone, revealing a video thumbnail, Lillian's slap frozen mid-motion, Maya's stunned face in sharp focus. The title blazed in bold letters. "Racist Flight Attendant Owned." The view count ticked upward, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, all mid-flight, spreading like wildfire across the internet. Comments flooded in below. "She deserved it. Horizon needs to fire her. That's James Carter's wife. Game over." Maya's breath caught, her victory suddenly sharper, more real. The world knew now. Lillian couldn't hide in the galley. In that galley, Lillian's phone buzzed, Nora's reply lighting up the screen. "On it. We'll flip this. She'll regret crossing you." Lillian smirked, a flicker of triumph cutting through her rage. Nora was fast, ruthless, a bulldog in heels who'd twisted narratives for her before. Lillian wouldn't let this stand. She'd turn it around, make them see Maya as the intruder, the problem. Her lips curled into a bitter smile as she typed a reply. "Make it ugly." She provoked me. She'd dealt with passengers like Maya before, people she'd pegged as out of place, and she'd always come out on top. This wouldn't be different, not if Nora could help it. The captain stepped out, leaving her alone with her plotting, her fingers tapping a rhythm of vengeance on the counter. Maya stared at Tasha's phone screen, the viral video a double-edged sword. It was justice, yes, but it was exposure too. Her face, her pain, splashed across the internet for strangers to dissect. She handed the phone back, her hands steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "Thank you," she said to Tasha, who nodded, her expression fierce. "She's toast now," Tasha replied, her voice thick with satisfaction. Maya wanted to believe it. Lillian suspended, the video out, James in control. It felt like a win, a clean break from the nightmare at 35,000 feet. But that unease lingered, a shadow creeping into her relief. Lillian's muttered slur replayed in her mind, the hatred behind it a promise of more to come. The plane dipped slightly, turbulence rattling the overhead bins, a jolt that mirrored the uncertainty in her gut. The Horizon Airlines flight from Chicago touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport with a sharp jolt, the wheels screeching against the rain-slicked runway as it slowed to a halt at Gate C-12. Maya Brooks stepped out of the jet bridge into the bustling terminal, her 6-month-old son, Elijah, nestled against her chest, his tiny snores a fragile anchor after the storm that had erupted at 35,000 feet. Her cheek still ached from Lillian Hayes' slap, a lingering sting now overshadowed by the exhaustion weighing her down. She adjusted her small diaper bag over her shoulder, her dark eyes scanning the crowd for James Carter, her husband, her rock, the CEO of Horizon Airlines whose 6'4" frame she'd spot anywhere. The terminal buzzed with the hum of announcements and the shuffle of travelers, their chatter a distant roar against the quiet resolve in her steps. She'd survived Lillian's venom, the viral video giving her a fleeting taste of justice. Now all she wanted was James's arms around her and Elijah, a safe harbor after the nightmare. But the air felt wrong, thick, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. A cluster of people near the gate stood too still, their eyes locked on her, their postures rigid with intent. Then she heard it, a low chant rising from the group, growing louder with every step she took. "Go back to coach! You don't belong!" The words slammed into her like a fist, her breath catching as she froze mid-stride. The mob surged forward, a dozen strong, their faces twisted with rage. Men in trucker hats, women clutching purses, all waving handmade signs scrawled with hate. "Justice for Lillian! No special treatment!" Their voices overlapped in a cacophony of fury, fueled by Nora Field's venomous posts on X, seeded during the flight at Lillian's command. "She attacked a worker," a burly man bellowed, his beard flecked with spit as he shook his fist. "Welfare trash in first class," a woman shrieked, her blonde curls bouncing as she jabbed a finger at Maya. Maya clutched Elijah tighter, his whimpers turning to cries as the noise engulfed them. Cameras flashed, not from curious passengers now, but from the mob, their phones aimed to capture her every flinch. Two security guards in gray uniforms rushed toward her, their lanky frames struggling to push through the crowd, but the shouts drowned out their calls to disperse. "You think you're better than us?" A man in a red cap snarled, stepping within arm's reach, his breath hot with beer and malice. Maya's voice shook as she spoke, steady despite the fear clawing her throat. "Back off. I'm just trying to leave." Her defiance only inflamed them, the chants morphing into slurs she'd seen online, but never faced so raw, so close. "Go back where you came from," they roared, their hatred a wall she couldn't breach. Lillian emerged from the jet bridge then, escorted by a third security guard, her head high, her smirk barely concealed beneath a thin veneer of composure. She stayed at a distance, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold like a puppeteer admiring her strings. The mob spotted her, their cheers shifting to her defense. "Lillian's the real hero," a woman yelled, waving her sign high. Lillian nodded subtly, her pale blue eyes locking with Maya's across the terminal, a silent taunt. "I did this." Maya's heart pounded, her knees trembling as the mob pressed closer, their phones rolling live streams of her humiliation. A plastic water bottle sailed through the air, missing Elijah's head by inches and smacking against the terminal floor with a dull thud. Maya gasped, ducking instinctively, her arms tightening around her son as his cries sharpened into wails. Tasha Green, the nurse from the flight, shoved through the crowd, her braids swinging as she planted herself beside Maya. "Leave her alone," Tasha shouted, her voice fierce but shaking. A man in a trucker hat pushed Tasha hard, sending her stumbling into a trash bin with a crash. The security guards yelled again, their batons raised but useless against the swelling tide of hate. Maya's eyes darted for an escape, but the mob circled like wolves, their slurs a relentless drumbeat in her ears. Then James Carter arrived, his towering figure cutting through the terminal like a blade through fog. His dark suit was stark against the chaos, his brown eyes blazing with fury as he shoved past the nearest heckler. A wiry man in a flannel shirt who stumbled back, stunned. "Get away from my wife now," James roared, his deep voice a thunderclap that silenced the mob for a split second. The air shifted, his presence electric, a force that bent the crowd's momentum. The security guards rallied, emboldened by his command, and began herding the mob back, their shouts sharper now. The woman with blonde curls dropped her sign, its edges crumpling underfoot as she retreated, muttering curses. The man in the red cap spat on the floor but backed off, his bravado wilting under James's glare. The mob faltered, their cameras lowering, their unity splintering like glass under a hammer. James reached Maya, his strong arms wrapping around her and Elijah, pulling them into the shelter of his chest. "I've got you," he said, his voice low and fierce, a promise carved in steel. She leaned into him, her cheek pressed against his heartbeat, the mob's echoes fading as his warmth steadied her. The terminal buzzed around them, travelers gawking, but James' power carved a bubble of safety she clung to. He turned to Lillian, who stood 50 feet away, her smirk faltering as she met his gaze. "You're fired," he declared, his words slicing through the air like a guillotine. "Effective immediately. No appeal. You're done at Horizon." Lillian's face twisted, her pale skin flushing crimson as she stepped forward, her voice shrill with disbelief. "You can't do this. I've got rights. The union—" James cut her off, his tone icy. "Assaulting my wife, inciting this? You've got nothing. Get out of my airport." The security guard beside Lillian grabbed her arm, pulling her back as she screamed, "This isn't over. You'll pay for this." Her threats rang hollow against James' authority, but her eyes burned with a promise of vengeance. She jerked free, storming toward the exit, her heels clacking a furious rhythm. Maya watched her go, James's arm a shield around her shoulders, a flicker of triumph pulsing through her veins. Lillian was fired, not just suspended. James had crushed her in front of everyone. But as they moved toward the escalators, a chill crept up her spine. Lillian's parting scream lingered, a vow that didn't feel empty. Beyond the glass walls, a shadow shifted. A man in a gray hoodie lingered near the exit, unnoticed by all but watching. The glass-walled security office at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport felt like a cage, its harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as Maya Brooks stepped inside. Her 6-month-old son, Elijah, still cradled against her chest. 2 hours had passed since the Horizon Airlines flight from Chicago landed, since James Carter had fired Lillian Hayes in front of a mob and pulled Maya from their hateful grasp. Her cheek bore a faint purple bruise from Lillian's slap, a mark that pulsed with every heartbeat. But she clung to the fragile hope that the worst was over. James stood beside her, his 6'4" frame tense, his dark suit rumpled from shoving through the crowd. His deep voice rumbled with controlled fury as he barked at a security guard, demanding an escort to their car. "We're not staying here a second longer than we have to," he said, his brown eyes scanning the room. Maya's heart still raced from the terminal chaos, but James's presence and Elijah's soft weight in her arms offered a lifeline. She'd escaped. Now she just needed to breathe. The office door swung open with a creak, and 2 police officers strode in, their navy uniforms crisp, their faces carved in hard lines. The taller one, a white man with a buzz cut and a jaw like granite, stepped forward, his badge glinting under the lights. "Maya Brooks?" he asked, his tone flat but edged with something cold. Maya nodded, her stomach tightening as she adjusted Elijah, his warmth grounding her. "Yes, that's me," she said, her voice steady despite the unease slithering up her spine. James turned, his broad shoulders squaring as he faced the cops. "What's this about?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing. The officer ignored him, pulling a notepad from his pocket, his gaze fixed on Maya like she was a suspect, not a victim. "We've got a report of assault," he said, flipping the notepad open. "Filed by Lillian Hayes. Claims you attacked her on the flight. Provoked a confrontation. She's got witnesses." Maya's breath caught, her mind reeling as the words sank in. Assault? Provoked? She'd been the one slapped, humiliated, mobbed. Yet here was Lillian, twisting reality again. James stepped closer, his voice rising like thunder. "That's a lie. She hit my wife. There's video proof. Hundreds saw it." The second officer, shorter with a patchy beard, smirked faintly, his hand resting on his belt. "We've got a different video," he said, pulling out his phone and tapping the screen. Maya's blood ran cold as the grainy footage played. Her in first class, the angle skewed, the sound distorted. Lillian's slap was gone, replaced by a clip of Maya raising her arm as if striking first, while Lillian flinched dramatically. The edit was clumsy but convincing, a lie stitched together with just enough truth to deceive. "That's fake," Maya said, her voice shaking with outrage. "She hit me. I never touched her." The tall officer shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Hayes' story checks out with her union rep and a few passengers. You're under arrest for assault, ma'am." Before she could protest, he grabbed her arm, yanking Elijah from her grip. Elijah wailed, his cries piercing the air as the shorter officer took him, passing him to a startled security guard. James lunged forward, his fists clenched. "You can't do this. That's my son." The tall officer shoved James back, his hands snapping to his holster with a warning glare. "Step back, sir, or you're next," he growled, his buzz cut gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Maya's world tilted, her wrists locked in cold steel as handcuffs snapped shut with a harsh click. She twisted, her eyes locked on Elijah, his tiny arms flailing in the security guard's awkward hold. "Give me my baby," she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation, raw and ragged against the sterile walls. The cops ignored her, their boots thudding as they dragged her toward the door. James roared, his voice a primal bellow that rattled the glass. "This is a setup. I'll bear you for this." But the officers didn't flinch, their faces set in stone, pulling Maya through the threshold as Elijah's cries faded into a haunting echo. Outside, half hidden behind a vending machine in the terminal hallway, Lillian Hayes watched, her blonde hair tucked under a baseball cap, her fired status a fresh wound she'd turned into fuel. She'd filed the police report an hour ago, Nora Fields handing her the doctored video her union allies had rushed to create. Her lips curled into a satisfied grin as Maya stumbled, handcuffed, her pleas for Elijah bouncing off the glass. Lillian had lost her job, her power stripped by James's decree. But this was better. Jail would break Maya, smear her name beyond repair. The cops, quick to buy Lillian's tearful, poor white woman act, were her pawns in a game she refused to lose. She adjusted her cap, her pale blue eyes glinting with triumph as she melted into the crowd, the chaos her handiwork unfolding like a dark symphony. Maya's feet dragged against the linoleum as the officers hauled her through the terminal, passengers gawking, some whispering, others filming with shaky hands. The mob from earlier had dispersed, but their hate lingered in the air, a stench Lillian's lies had thickened. James followed, his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders to his lawyer, a sharp-edged woman named Diane Voss he'd hired on the spot. "Get her out now. It's a frame-up, fake video, biased cops. Sue Hayes for everything she's got." His voice trembled with rage, but the system didn't bend. The tall officer shoved Maya into a squad car parked outside, the door slamming shut with a finality that crushed her fleeting victory. Inside, her wrists ached against the cuffs, her chest heaving as she fought panic. Elijah's cries haunted her, a sound she couldn't reach. The shorter cop slid into the driver's seat, his smirk visible in the rearview mirror. "Should have stayed in coach," he muttered, his tone dripping with the same racism Lillian had wielded. Maya's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. "You're wrong," she said, her voice low and fierce. "That video's a lie. She hit me." The cop chuckled, starting the engine. "Tell it to the judge, lady. Your kind always has excuses." The car pulled away, the terminal lights streaking past in a blur of gray and blue. Lillian slipped further into the crowd, texting Nora with swift fingers. "She's arrested. Video worked. Keep pushing." Her grin widened. James had fired her, but she'd flipped the board, turning Maya's escape into a cage. The trap was set, and she was just getting started. The gray walls of King County Jail in Seattle closed in around Maya Brooks like a tomb, the air thick with the stench of bleach and despair as she stumbled through intake the morning after her arrest. Her wrists were raw from the handcuffs that had bound her at SeaTac, her navy blouse swapped for an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on her frame. Her 6-month-old son, Elijah, was gone, taken by a social worker after James Carter fought a tense standoff with police in the terminal's security office. The ache of his absence gnawed at her chest, sharper than the faint purple bruise still marking her cheek from Lillian Hayes' slap. She clutched a thin blanket tossed to her by a guard, her dark eyes hollow but unyielding as she faced the hell she'd been thrown into. Released on bail wasn't an option yet. James was working on it, but the system moved slow, and Lillian's lies moved faster. 2 officers loomed over her in the holding area, their badges glinting in the dim light. The taller one, a beefy man with a shaved head and a sneer, leaned close as he handed her a paper tag for her belongings. "Don't belong anywhere, do you?" he said, his voice thick with the same contempt Lillian had spat on the plane. The shorter guard, wiry with a scar across his cheek, chuckled, his eyes raking over her. "Hayes is a hero around here. You're just trash," she took out. Maya's stomach twisted, her breath shallow as she gripped the blanket tighter, refusing to let their words break her. She was shoved into the cell block, iron bars clanging shut behind her, locking her in with a dozen other women. The air buzzed with tension, eyes tracking her every move. A group of inmates near the back whispered, their voices low but venomous. "That's her, the one who attacked Lillian," one muttered, her tattooed arm flexing as she cracked her knuckles. Lillian's narrative had spread like wildfire, fueled by Nora Field's posts and the guards' bias, turning the jail into hostile ground. Maya kept her head high, her jaw set, but fear coiled tight in her chest as she found an empty bunk. The attack came at dawn, the cell block lights flickering as breakfast trays clattered in the distance. 3 inmates cornered her, their movements swift and rehearsed. The leader, a stocky woman with a shaved head and a scar slicing her brow, grabbed Maya's arm, twisting it hard. "Hayes has friends here," she hissed, her breath hot against Maya's face. "You're done." A second woman, lanky with matted hair, swung a fist, catching Maya's jaw with a crack that sent her reeling. Pain exploded across her face, stars bursting in her vision as she stumbled back. The third, wiry and silent, kicked her ribs, the blow knocking the air from her lungs. Maya crumpled to the cold concrete, gasping, her arms curling instinctively to protect her core. The guards watched from the catwalk, their radios silent, smirks twitching on their lips as blows rained down. Then a shout cut through the chaos. "Enough, Jade!" A wiry black inmate with gray-streaked braids shoved through, her eyes blazing. "Back off. She ain't your enemy." The attackers hesitated. The stocky leader, Jade, snarling but stepping back as Tasha Green's presence loomed like a shield. Tasha, the nurse from the flight, had landed in this cell block on a minor charge, her sharp eyes recognizing Maya from the plane. She'd seen the slap, recorded it, and now she stood between Maya and the fists primed to break her. "Back off," Tasha repeated, her voice low and steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. The guards finally barked from the catwalk. "Break it up!" Their tone lazy, more annoyed than urgent. Jade and her crew slunk away, muttering curses, their bravado fading under Tasha's glare. Tasha knelt beside Maya, her grip firm but gentle as she helped her up. "I saw your live stream from the flight," she whispered, her gray-streaked braids brushing Maya's shoulder. "You're not what they say." Maya wiped blood from her lip, her ribs throbbing, and nodded, gratitude swelling despite the pain. "Thank you," she rasped, leaning against the bunk as Tasha handed her a rag torn from an old shirt. "They're Lillian's dogs," Tasha said, her eyes flicking toward the guards pacing above. "She's got them egged on, probably through that friend of hers, Nora. I've seen her type before." Maya's eyes narrowed, her mind sharpening through the haze of pain. Lillian's reach stretched beyond the plane, beyond the terminal mob, into this concrete hell. Tasha was an ally, a crack in the prison's wall, and Maya seized it. "I need to get word out," she whispered, her voice trembling but fierce. Tasha grinned, slipping her a pencil stub hidden in her sock. "Write it. I'll smuggle it outside." Maya scribbled a note, her hands shaking as she pressed the lead to a scrap of paper. "James, I'm alive. Lillian's rigged the jail. Attacks may be worse next. Get me out." She folded it tight, passing it to Tasha, who tucked it back into her sock with a nod. "Hang on," Tasha said, her tone a lifeline in the dark. Outside, James waged war from Horizon Airlines' Seattle office, his 6'4" frame a storm cloud as he slammed files on his desk. His deep voice boomed over the phone to Diane Voss, his lawyer. "She's in jail. Lillian's behind it. Find that real footage now." Diane's reply crackled through, "Working on it. I've got a lead on the union's dirty hands." James paced, his hands trembling as he dialed Tasha's hospital contact, a friend she'd texted before her arrest, hoping for news. The friend's voice was tight. "She's in there, James. It's bad." His jaw clenched, rage a furnace in his chest. Lillian had turned his family into prey, and he'd burn her world to ash for it. Back in the cell block, the lights dimmed for the night, casting long shadows as Maya lay on her bunk, pain pulsing through her ribs. Tasha hovered nearby, watching for guards. The tall one with the shaved head passed by, his sneer cutting through the gloom. "Hayes'll finish you yet," he muttered, his radio crackling as he moved on. Maya's breath hitched, her mind racing. She'd survived the slap, the mob, and now this beating. But Lillian's claws were sinking deeper, and the jail was only the beginning. Night draped the quiet streets of Renton, a leafy suburb just south of Seattle, in a shroud of stillness, the faint glow of streetlights casting long shadows across Maya Brooks's modest two-story home. Inside, James Carter's older sister, Keisha, barricaded herself in the upstairs nursery, clutching 6-month-old Elijah to her chest. Hours earlier, Maya had been hauled off to King County Jail, framed by Lillian Hayes' lies, leaving Keisha to flee the airport with the baby under James's desperate orders. The house, with its white siding and rose bushes Maya had planted herself, stood as a sanctuary, until now. Outside, the stillness shattered as a mob swelled to 20, their voices a guttural roar that shook the windows. "Get out! You don't belong here!" a man bellowed, his words slurred with rage as he hurled a rock through the living room window. Glass exploded inward, the crash echoing like gunfire, and Keisha flinched, pressing Elijah tighter as his whimpers turned to cries. The crowd's fury was no accident. Lillian had leaked Maya's address to Nora Fields during the flight, and Nora's venomous posts on X had lit the fuse. Spray paint hissed, red streaks spelling slurs across the siding. "Thug! Welfare trash!" The mob surged forward, fists pounding the front door, boots kicking at the frame. "She attacked Lillian! Pay for it!" a woman screeched, her voice piercing the night as another brick sailed through, splintering the coffee table Maya had saved months to buy. Keisha's heart hammered, her breath shallow as she fumbled for her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "They're breaking in! Please hurry!" she pleaded, her voice cracking as Elijah wailed against her shoulder. The operator's response was curt, detached. "We've got a call about a protest. Units are on the way. Stay calm." The line clicked dead, and Keisha's stomach dropped. Protest? This was a lynching in the making, and the cops' indifference echoed the bias that had jailed Maya. In King County Jail, Maya sat on her bunk, her orange jumpsuit stained with blood from the earlier beating, her ribs throbbing as Tasha Green hovered nearby. A guard had muttered about trouble at her place, and Tasha had pried the truth from a sympathetic orderly. Her house was under attack. Maya's eyes widened, panic clawing her throat as she grabbed Tasha's arm. "They've got Elijah. My sister-in-law's there." Tasha's face hardened, her gray-streaked braids swinging as she handed Maya her phone, smuggled past the guards. "Livestream it. Let the world see," she urged, her voice fierce. Maya nodded, her hands shaking as she hit record, her voice trembling but resolute. "This is Maya Brooks. They're burning my house because of Lillian Hayes' lies. My son's inside. We're trapped." She angled the screen to the cell bars, her bruised face a stark testament to the hate chasing her. The stream uploaded to X, views climbing fast. 5,000, 10,000, outrage flooding the comments. "This is insane! Lillian's a monster! Save her!" Outside, the mob escalated, a Molotov cocktail arcing through the broken window, flames licking the curtains as smoke billowed into the house. Keisha coughed, her eyes stinging as she stumbled to the nursery window, prying it open with one hand. Keisha dropped 6 feet to the backyard grass, her knees buckling as she landed, Elijah's cries sharpening in the smoky air. Flames roared behind her, the living room now a furnace. The mob's cheers deafening as they breached the front door with a battering ram scavenged from a shed. Their boots stomped through her sister-in-law's burning home, shattering picture frames and overturning furniture in a frenzy of hate. Keisha stumbled toward the garage, her lungs burning as she clutched Elijah, his tiny body trembling against hers. She spotted a rusty lawnmower, dragging it to block the side door, a flimsy barricade against the chaos. Her phone buzzed. James, his voice a lifeline through the static. "Keisha, where are you? I'm coming," she choked out. "Backyard, they're burning it down." Before the call cut out, drowned by the mob's shouts, "Burn it all. She's done." In her cell, Maya's chest heaved, hope flickering as her live stream hit 20,000 views, strangers rallying with cries of justice for Maya. She panned the camera again, tears welling as she whispered, "Please, someone help them." Tasha squeezed her shoulder, her eyes fierce. They're seeing it. Keep going. But the hope twisted into dread as two squad cars screeched to a halt outside the jail, their red and blue lights flashing through the barred window. Four officers stepped out, their faces stern, hands on holsters. The tall guard with the shaved head kicked open the cell block door, his flashlight blinding Maya as he barked, "Maya Brooks, you're under arrest for inciting a riot." Her jaw dropped, the phone slipping in her grip as she clutched it tighter. "What? They attacked me," she shouted. But the officer yanked her up, wrenching the phone away as the livestream cut to black. The mob's cheers echoed in her mind, now mirrored by the cuffs snapping back onto her wrists. Lillian watched from a rented sedan 2 blocks away, her blonde hair hidden under a hoodie, her pale eyes glinting with vicious glee. The news played on her phone, a live feed of the fire captioned, "Outrage over Brooks trial." She smirked, texting Nora. "They're at her house. She's finished." Nora's reply buzzed back, "Perfect. Grayson's leaning our way. You're golden." Lillian leaned back, the glow of flames reflecting in her windshield. She'd lost her job, faced suspension, but this, Maya's home in ashes, her life in ruins, was sweeter than any reinstatement. She'd broken her, and the mob was her fist. Her fingers tapped the steering wheel, a rhythm of triumph as she imagined Maya's despair behind bars. The officers dragged Maya to a squad car, Elijah's screams replaced by the wail of distant sirens as Renton's fire trucks raced toward the blaze. The shorter cop smirked from the driver's seat. "Should have kept quiet," he muttered, starting the engine. Maya's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed, her mind racing. She'd escaped the plane, turned the mob's hate into a plea for help, but Lillian's trap had snapped shut, a second arrest that crushed her fragile hope. As the car pulled away, her home a smoldering ruin on the horizon, she whispered, "I won't stop," a vow against the darkness swallowing her. Outside, Detective Ray Salazar parked discreetly, his camera rolling as he captured the mob's retreat, a silent witness to the war Lillian had unleashed. The Seattle courthouse loomed in the gray drizzle of a late April morning, its stone facade a silent witness to the chaos that had consumed Maya Brooks's life over the past month. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with restless energy, wooden benches packed with reporters, Lillian Hayes supporters, and a handful of Maya's allies, their whispers a low hum beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. Maya stood at the defense table, her 6-month-old son, Elijah, safe with Keisha at a friend's house after the fire that razed their home. The bruise on her cheek from Lillian's slap had faded to a shadow, but the weight of false assault charges, and now inciting a riot, pressed down like a guillotine. She wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back, her dark eyes steady as she faced the judge's bench. James Carter sat behind her, his 6'4" frame tense, his deep voice silent, but his presence a rock she clung to. She'd thought surviving jail would free her. Today would prove her wrong. Judge Leonard Baxter banged his gavel, his grizzled face and thinning white hair framed by a reputation for harsh rulings, especially against minorities. His jowls quivered as he glared over his glasses, his bias hanging over the room like a storm cloud. "Order!" he barked, his voice gravelly, silencing the crowd. Maya's lawyer, Diane Voss, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a steel-gray bob, stood beside her briefcase stuffed with evidence James had fought to secure. Across the aisle, Lillian Hayes sat at the prosecution table, her blonde hair neatly pinned, her modest gray dress a stark contrast to her flight attendant uniform. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her face a mask of victimhood as Nora Fields, her former colleague turned legal bulldog, whispered in her ear. The trial began, the assault case Lillian had fabricated now a public spectacle, amplified by the fire and Maya's second arrest. The prosecutor, a wiry man with a nasal voice named Paul Grayson, strode forward, holding up a tablet with a doctored video. On March 25th, Maya Brooks attacked Lillian Hayes, a dedicated flight attendant, in first class, he declared, pressing play. The grainy footage rolled, Maya's arm raised, Lillian flinching, the slap erased by clever edits. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, Lillian's supporters nodding smugly, their signs from the protest tucked under seats. Maya clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as the lie played out. "That's not what happened," she whispered to Diane, her voice trembling with fury. Lillian took the stand next, her performance Oscar-worthy. She clutched the tissue, her voice quavering as she leaned into the microphone. "I was just doing my job, keeping first class peaceful. She came at me, yelling, swinging her arm. I feared for my life." Tears spilled down her cheeks, her pale eyes wide with rehearsed terror. Nora patted her shoulder, her grin barely concealed as the jury, mostly white, their faces stern, leaned forward, eating it up. Diane rose, her voice cutting through the tension. "Objection, Your Honor. That video's been manipulated. We have the original footage proving Miss Hayes assaulted my client." She held up a USB drive, her posture unyielding. But Baxter's eyes narrowed, his gavel hovering. "Where's this alleged evidence?" he snapped, his tone dripping with skepticism. Diane stepped forward, inserting the USB drive into the courtroom system, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. The screen flickered, then went black, a soft hiss of static replacing the image. "Technical difficulties," a clerk muttered, fumbling with cables as the room stirred. Diane's jaw tightened, her eyes darting to James, who gripped the bench rail, his knuckles white. "This is sabotage," he hissed, loud enough for the jury to hear. The real footage, security cam proof of Lillian's slap, had vanished, a glitch too convenient to be chance. Lillian's smirk flickered as she wiped her eyes, her allies in the union likely behind the tampering. The prosecutor pounced, waving the USB away. "No evidence, no credibility. The defendant's stalling." Judge Baxter banged his gavel again, his voice booming. "Enough! We proceed with what's before us." Maya's heart sank, her mind racing. The jury's faces hardened, doubt shifting to conviction as Lillian's sobs filled the silence. Jail loomed, her name a punching bag for a nation Lillian had turned against her. James couldn't take it. He surged to his feet, his deep voice thundering through the courtroom. "This is a sham. That judge is corrupt. Hayes is lying, and you're letting her." The gallery erupted, Lillian's supporters shouting, "Sit down," while reporters scribbled furiously. Baxter's face reddened, his gavel slamming like a gunshot. "Order! Mr. Carter, you're in contempt!" Bailiffs moved toward him, but his outburst cracked the room's tension. A juror, a young black woman in the back row, frowned, her eyes flickering to Maya with a hint of doubt. Another, an older man, shifted uncomfortably, his pen pausing. Maya felt a spark of hope, her breath steadying as Diane whispered, "He's swaying them. We've got a shot." Lillian's mask slipped for a split second, her eyes narrowing as James sat, his glare locked on her. She'd played the victim flawlessly, but his rage had pierced her act. Nora leaned over, her voice urgent. "Stick to the script. We've got this." Lillian nodded, dabbing her eyes again. But the jury's shift unnerved her. The prosecutor called a recess, the courtroom emptying as whispers swirled. Maya turned to Diane, her voice low. "We're losing, aren't we?" Diane shook her head, her eyes fierce. "Not yet. James bought us time. We'll find that footage." But outside, Lillian's next strike landed. Nora leaked Maya's temporary address, a friend's house where Keisha hid with Elijah, to X, posting, "Here's where the thug hides." Within hours, a racist mob formed outside, their chants audible through the courthouse TV as news broke the recess. "Get out, fraud!" they screamed, pounding on the door. Maya's phone buzzed with a frantic call from Keisha, her voice shaking. "They're here, Maya. What do I do?" Maya's knees buckled, James catching her as she gasped, "They won't stop." Lillian slipped out of the courtroom, her gray dress swishing as she joined Nora in the hallway, her smirk returning. "She's done," she said, her voice cold with triumph. "Jail or not, that mob will finish her." Nora grinned, her phone pinging with updates. "We've got Baxter in pocket. Footage stays gone. You're golden." Night stretched long and suffocating over King County Jail, the cell block steeped in shadows as the flickering lights cast a dim glow across the concrete. Maya Brooks lay on her bunk, her orange jumpsuit stiff with dried blood from the earlier beating, her ribs aching with every shallow breath. Her 6-month-old son Elijah was still with Keisha, hiding from the mob that had stormed their temporary refuge after Nora Fields leaked the address during the trial recess. The courthouse had been a battlefield, the missing footage a knife in her defense. And now, back in this cage, the weight of Lillian Hayes' hate pressed down harder than ever. Tasha Green, her ally from the flight, hovered nearby, her gray-streaked braids catching the faint light as she scanned the cell block for threats. Maya's livestream from jail had hit 200,000 views, a distant spark of hope. But here, Lillian's claws held tight. The attack came at midnight, the cell block silent save for the soft clatter of a guard's boots fading down the hall. A shadow moved, swift, deliberate, slipping between the bunks. A wiry inmate with a shaved head and a jagged scar across her neck lunged at Maya, a shank glinting in her fist, its metal edge catching the dim light. "Hayes says good night," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper as she swung. Maya rolled off the bunk, the blade slicing the air where her throat had been, embedding in the thin mattress with a dull thud. Pain flared in her ribs as she hit the floor, but adrenaline surged, her hands scrabbling for anything to fight back. Tasha leapt in, tackling the attacker from behind, her wiry frame slamming the woman against the bunk frame. The shank clattered free, skittering across the concrete as the two grappled, grunts echoing in the dark. Another figure emerged, a stocky woman with matted hair, jade from the earlier beating, swinging a sock stuffed with soap bars. It cracked against Tasha's shoulder, sending her stumbling with a sharp cry. Maya lunged, grabbing the shank from the floor, her hands trembling as she brandished it. "Back off!" she shouted, her voice raw, cutting through the chaos. The attackers froze, Jade's eyes narrowing, but a third voice broke the standoff. "Enough!" An older inmate with a limp, Marla, a lifer who'd stayed neutral, hobbled forward, her gravelly tone commanding. "You're messing with the wrong one. Hayes ain't worth it." The scarred woman spat, but she and Jade retreated, melting into the shadows as the guards' radios finally crackled to life, their footsteps approaching lazily. Tasha helped Maya up, her shoulder bruised but her grin fierce. "Told you I've got your back," she said, panting. Maya nodded, blood trickling from a fresh cut on her arm, her mind racing. Lillian had hired a hit, through Nora, no doubt, turning the jail into a kill zone. She clutched the shank, handing it to Tasha. "We need to move fast," she whispered. "James needs to know." Tasha tucked the weapon away, her eyes glinting with resolve. Tasha slipped a folded note from her sock, the one Maya had written earlier, and handed it over. "I got this to a guard who owes me," she whispered, her voice steady despite the ache in her shoulder. "Your man'll have it by morning." Maya exhaled, a flicker of relief cutting through the nightmare as she pressed the rag Tasha had given her against her bleeding arm. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "Lillian's not stopping. She'll try again." Tasha nodded, her gaze flicking to the catwalk where the tall guard with the shaved head lingered, his radio silent now, his smirk a shadow in the gloom. "She's got money or pull. Maybe both. We've got to outlast her." Maya leaned back against the bunk, her body bruised but her spirit unbroken. The live stream had rallied strangers. Tasha's help was a lifeline. She'd fight from here, somehow. Outside, James Carter stormed through Horizon Airlines' Seattle headquarters, his 6'4" frame a whirlwind of rage as he clutched Tasha's smuggled note. Its pencil scrawl a gut punch. "James, I'm alive. Lillian's rigged the jail. Attacks, maybe worse next. Get me out." His deep voice boomed across the sleek office, his dark suit creased from sleepless nights. "Diane, it's confirmed. Hayes bribed someone inside. Shut this down now." Diane Voss, his lawyer, stood at his desk, her phone pressed to her ear, her steel gray bob glinting under the lights. "Got a whistleblower, union insider. The real footage resurfaced too." "We're moving," she replied, her tone a blade slicing through the chaos. James acted fast, his fury a furnace driving him. He called a press conference, his towering presence dominating the HQ lobby as cameras flashed, reporters jostling for sound bites. "Lillian Hayes is done," he declared, his voice a thunderclap. "She assaulted my wife, framed her, burned our home. Now she's rigging jail. I'm firing her union contract. Every ally she's got at Horizon is out. Effective immediately." The room erupted, gasps rippling as he held up the real footage. HD security cam proof of Lillian's slap, recovered from a backup Diane's team had unearthed. The video played on a giant screen, Maya's stunned face clear, Lillian's hands striking with vicious intent. The tide turned, gasps morphing into outrage as the broadcast cut to Lillian's smug face from earlier news clips, now a stark contrast to the truth. Back in the jail, the tall guard stormed past Maya's cell, his face red, his radio crackling with orders. "Hayes is out. Carter's cleaning house," a voice snapped through static. Jade and her crew exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado fading as Tasha grinned. "Your man's a beast," she whispered to Maya. "Note worked." Maya's chest swelled, her bruises pulsing with renewed hope. The cell block buzzed, guards scrambling. The hit had failed, and Lillian's grip was slipping. But in a cheap motel room across town, Lillian raged, her blonde hair wild as she watched James's conference on a grainy TV. Her phone buzzed. "Nora, they've got the footage. You're toast." She slammed it down, her pale eyes burning. "Not yet," she hissed, dialing a new number. "Finish her tonight. I'll double it." The neon sign of the SeaTac Inn flickered against the damp night sky, casting a sickly glow over the cracked parking lot where Maya Brooks stood, her 6-month-old son, Elijah, cradled in her arms. It was the night after her release from King County Jail, hours after Judge Baxter dismissed the charges, when James Carter's press conference unleashed the real footage of Lillian Hayes' slap. The courthouse victory had felt like a lifeline. Elijah returned from Keisha's care, the jail doors slamming shut behind her, but the air still hummed with danger. James had secured this motel room, a temporary refuge after their Renton home burned to ash, its walls too fragile to hold their shattered lives. Maya's dark eyes scanned the lot, her bruised body aching beneath a borrowed hoodie, but relief washed over her as Elijah's soft coos broke the silence. She'd survived Lillian's hell, slap, mob, jail, shank, and now with James by her side, she dared to hope the nightmare was over. Inside the room, James paced the worn carpet, his 6 feet 4 frame taut with exhaustion, his dark suit jacket slung over a chair. His deep voice rumbled through a call to Diane Voss, his lawyer, as he gripped his phone. "She's out, Diane, but Lillian's still loose. Keep digging. Union's hiding something." Diane's reply crackled back. "We've got her on the ropes, whistleblowers singing. She won't wriggle out." James nodded, ending the call as Maya stepped inside, locking the door behind her. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his strong arms engulfing her and Elijah, his breath warm against her hair. "You're safe now," he said, his tone soft but fierce, a vow etched in every word. She leaned into him, her cheek pressed against his chest, the steady thud of his heart a balm after days of chaos. The motel's thin walls muffled the distant hum of jets from SeaTac, a fragile peace settling over them. But peace shattered in an instant. A deafening blast rocked the parking lot, the motel window exploding inward as Maya's rented sedan erupted in flames. Glass shards rained across the carpet like jagged stars, the acrid stench of gasoline flooding the room. Maya screamed, diving for Elijah's crib as James yanked them behind the bed, his body shielding theirs. The heat seared through the broken window, flames licking the night sky as the car's husk twisted in the inferno. Guests shrieked in the halls, footsteps pounding as panic gripped the motel. Maya's heart hammered, her bruises flaring as she clutched Elijah, his wails piercing the chaos. "She's back," she gasped, her voice trembling with realization. Lillian Hayes had struck again, her vengeance a fire that wouldn't die. Across town, Lillian watched from a dingy safe house, a rented apartment in Tukwila, her blonde hair tangled, her pale face lit by her phone's glow. She'd hired a new hitman after the jail failure, a lean man in a black jacket who'd planted the bomb with cold precision. Her lips curled as she texted Nora Fields. "Car's gone, she's next." Nora's reply buzzed. "Clean hit. You're clear." Lillian leaned back, the news looping the explosion as vandalism, her smirk widening. She'd lost everything, job, union, trial, but Maya's death would be her win. James grabbed a chair, smashing the remaining glass from the window frame, his movements swift despite the blood trickling from a cut on his hand. "We've got to move," he shouted, his deep voice cutting through the roar of the flames outside. Maya scooped Elijah from the crib, her legs trembling as she followed James to the door, smoke curling into the room like a living thing. The hitman, a shadow in a black jacket, slipped away from the lot, his silenced pistol still warm from a warning shot he'd fired into the car's windshield before the blast. He melted into the shadows, his job done, leaving chaos in his wake. James kicked the door open, the hallway a blur of screaming guests and flashing exit signs, and pulled Maya toward the stairwell, her hoodie catching on a splintered frame as they ran. Outside, the parking lot was a war zone. Twisted metal glowing red, flames casting wild shadows across the asphalt. Sirens wailed in the distance, red and blue lights flickering as Seattle PD and fire trucks raced toward the scene. Maya stumbled onto the grass, Elijah's cries muffled against her chest as she sank to her knees, the heat searing her back. James dropped beside her, his hand gripping her shoulder, his eyes scanning the lot for the threat. "Stay down," he growled, dialing 911 with one hand. "Explosion outside. Get here now." His voice was a roar, raw with fury as he shielded them from the debris raining down. A guest phone caught the chase live from a second-floor window, the footage streaming to X. 200,000 views in minutes, comments flooding. "She's a warrior. Lillian's done." Detective Ray Salazar screeched into the lot in an unmarked car, his dark eyes narrowing as he leapt out, camera in hand. He trailed the mob from Renton, piecing together Lillian's web, and now he spotted the hitman's retreat, a fleeting figure darting toward a side street. Ray bolted after him, his boots pounding the pavement, his breath sharp as he cornered the man near a dumpster. "Drop it," he barked, drawing his Glock. The hitman froze, his pistol clattering to the ground as Ray cuffed him, wrenching a burner phone from his jacket pocket. Lillian's number glowed on the screen, a damning link Ray pocketed with a grim nod. He dragged the man back to the lot, shoving him into a squad car as officers swarmed, their shouts cutting through the smoke. Lillian's safe house TV blared the update, her smirk vanishing as the anchor reported, "Suspect apprehended in motel explosion." Linked to Lillian Hayes. She raged, hurling her phone at the wall, its screen shattering as she grabbed a bag, her vengeance unraveling. She'd fled to Tukwila after James' conference, but Ray's sting was closing in. She'd been lured to a gas station earlier by an undercover cop posing as a supporter, a trap she'd narrowly dodged. Now, with the hitman caught, her fire had turned to ash. Back at the motel, Maya clung to Elijah, James' bloodied hand steadying her as cops secured the scene. "She won't stop," she whispered, her voice a thread of steel. James nodded, his jaw set. "Neither will we." The sleek studio of King 5 News in Seattle hummed with anticipation, its bright lights casting a stark glow over Maya Brooks as she stood at the podium, her 6-month-old son, Elijah, cradled in her arms. It was 1 week after the explosion at the SeaTac Inn, 1 week since Detective Ray Salazar cuffed Lillian Hayes' hitman and unraveled her deadly web. Maya's dark hair was pulled back, her navy dress crisp against her bruised but unbowed frame, her eyes fierce as she faced a swarm of reporters, their cameras rolling, microphones thrust forward like spears. James Carter stood beside her, his 6'4" figure a quiet fortress, his arm bandaged from the motel chaos. The world had watched her live streams, 5 million views from the jail cell and the burning shed. Lillian's racist screed a viral stain they'd come to erase. She'd survived slap, fire, jail, and assassination. Now this was her reckoning. The room hushed as Maya's voice cut through, steady and raw. "Lillian Hayes tried to destroy me," she said, her gaze piercing the lenses. "She slapped me on that flight, framed me with lies, burned my home, sent a killer after my family, all because I dared to sit in first class with my son." She paused, lifting Elijah slightly, his soft coos a quiet anchor in the storm. "She turned hate into a weapon, but I'm still here." Reporters scribbled furiously as she held up a tablet, Lillian's manifesto glowing on the screen. A screed of venom that had ignited her followers, now backfiring as X banned accounts in droves. Lillian's arrest had unfolded live the night before, caught in Ray's sting at a Tukwila gas station. Her blonde hair matted, her pale face twisted with fury, she'd screamed, "You'll never belong!" As cuffs snapped shut, her hitman's confession sealing her fate, attempted murder, conspiracy, bribery piling high. Maya's chest swelled, her bruises a testament to her fight as she continued, her voice rising. She thought she could break me, turn the world against me. But you saw me. Millions of you shared my truth, and it stopped her. The reporters nodded, some clapping, their pens pausing as her words sank in. Tasha Green, released from jail and now a friend, stood in the back, her gray-streaked braids framing a proud smile. Ray Salazar lingered near the exit, his dark eyes watchful, his camera stilled, but his presence a quiet victory. Maya had outsmarted Lillian at every turn. Live streams, Tasha's note, the shed trap, and now she stood tall, the mob's fire a memory she turned to strength. Then came the twist. James stepped forward, his bandaged arm raised, his deep voice silencing the room. "I've run Horizon Airlines long enough," he said, his brown eyes locking with Maya's. "I'm stepping down, effective today. My wife, Maya Brooks, is your new CEO." The studio erupted, gasps and shouts colliding as cameras flashed, reporters scrambling to process the bombshell. Maya's jaw dropped, her breath catching as James's words echoed through the studio, Elijah squirming in her stunned grip. "James, what?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos of reporters shouting questions. "Why now? What's her plan?" James smiled, his hand firm on hers, his deep voice steady as he waved off the clamor. "She's faced hell and won. No one's better to lead." The room spun, Maya's mind reeling as the implications sank in. CEO, not just a survivor, but the power behind Horizon, a throne Lillian had coveted and lost. Her eyes welled, her battered body trembling with a mix of shock and pride. She'd fought for her life, her son, her truth. Now she held the reins, flipping the script on every racist who doubted her. Lillian most of all. The applause thundered, a wave of vindication crashing over her as James stepped back, his gaze a quiet fire of trust. Across town, in a holding cell at the King County Correctional Facility, Lillian Hayes watched the broadcast on a grainy TV bolted to the wall, her scream a raw howl as she lunged at the screen. "No, she can't have it!" Her voice cracked, her pale hands clawing the air as guards pinned her back, her gray jumpsuit a stark fall from her crisp uniform. The reversal was absolute. Lillian, the tyrant of first class, now caged. Maya, the slapped mother, now ruling the airline she'd weaponized. A guard smirked, muttering, "Guess you lost, Hayes." As her manifesto's last echoes faded, her followers scattering like ash in the wind. Her TV spotlights, her crocodile tears, all dust against Maya's ascent. Maya took the podium again, her voice steadying as she gripped the mic. Elijah's coo's a soft rhythm beside her. "Horizon's changing," she said, her tones steel and silk. "My first order, anyone who spews hate like Lillian Hayes is banned from our flights for life." The room erupted again, applause roaring as James nodded, his pride palpable. She turned survival into power, her battered hands rewriting the rules Lillian had lived by. Reporters scribbled headlines, "From victim to victor, Maya Brooks takes Horizon," as the studio pulsed with new energy, her reign beginning where Lillian's ended. Tasha stepped forward, her nurse's hands clapping loudest, her eyes shining with shared triumph. Ray Salazar slipped out, his work done, the hitman's confession a key that had locked Lillian away. The broadcast cut to Lillian's cell, her final scream drowned by Maya's voice, a poetic echo of the intercom that had sparked this war. "You'll never belong," Lillian had shrieked, but Maya did more than belong. She commanded. The studio lights dimmed, the press conference winding down, but Maya lingered, her eyes on the Seattle skyline beyond the glass. She'd faced a slap, a smear, a mob, a fire, a jail, a hitman, each blow heavier, each counterattack from Lillian more ruthless. Yet here she stood, not just free but victorious. James leaned close, his whisper warm against her ear. "You're unstoppable," she smiled, faint but fierce, her fingers brushing Elijah's curls. "We are," she corrected, her voice a vow as the camera stilled, her story burning on, a tide Lillian couldn't outrun. The gray walls of the Washington State Correctional Facility in Tacoma loomed under a slate sky, their cold concrete a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of Maya Brooks's press conference airing live on King 5 News. Inside a cramped cell, Lillian Hayes sat hunched on a metal bunk, her blonde hair loose and tangled, her gray jumpsuit a badge of her fall from grace. The small TV bolted to the wall blared Maya's voice, each word a dagger in Lillian's gut. Anyone who spews hate like Lillian Hayes is banned from our flights for life. Her reinstatement revoked, her union gutted, her hitman in custody. Lillian's empire of hate had crumbled, but her eyes burned with defiance as the broadcast cut to Maya's new title, CEO of Horizon Airlines. A primal scream ripped from her throat, her pale hands slamming against the bunk as guards glanced over. Unmoved. She wouldn't let it end like this. Not while she still had breath. Lillian grabbed a smuggled burner phone, a relic from Nora Field's last drop before her own arrest that morning. Caught fleeing Tukwila with a suitcase of cash and a laptop full of evidence. Nora had cracked under pressure, spilling Lillian's plans to Detective Ray Salazar, but Lillian didn't know that yet. Her fingers flew across the keys, texting a contact she'd cultivated in prison. Carter's wife took over. Hit Horizon HQ. Make it big. I've got funds left. The reply buzzed back. On it. Crowd's ready. She smirked, her mind racing. If she couldn't kill Maya directly, she'd burn her legacy to the ground. The TV looped Maya's speech, the applause a taunt. But Lillian saw an opening. Her followers, scattered but still rabid, could be her final weapon. At Horizon Airlines' sleek headquarters in downtown Seattle, Maya sat in her new office, the glass walls offering a panoramic view of the Puget Sound. She'd just signed her first order as CEO, the lifetime ban, her signature a bold slash on the page. Elijah napped in a portable crib beside her desk, his soft breaths a quiet victory after weeks of terror. James leaned against the doorframe, his bandaged arm a reminder of their fight, his deep voice soft with pride. You're rewriting the rules, Maya. She smiled, faint but fierce, her dark eyes tracing the skyline. She thought she'd bury us. I'm burying her instead. The room hummed with a new energy, staff bustling as Horizon pivoted under her command. But outside, a storm brewed. Sirens wailed faintly, growing louder as a crowd swelled outside the building. 50 strong, then 100, their chants a guttural roar. Justice for Lillian! Down with Brooks! Signs waved wildly. No VIPs over workers. Reinstate Hayes. Their fury, fueled by Lillian's prison text, spread through encrypted channels by her contact. Glass shattered as a brick crashed through the lobby window, the sound a gunshot in Maya's ears. She jolted, scooping Elijah into her arms as James rushed to the window, his jaw tightening. She's not done, he growled, dialing security. The mob surged, their boots stomping the pavement, a final tempest Lillian had unleashed from her cell. Maya clutched Elijah tighter, his tiny body trembling against her chest as the mob's roars echoed through the glass walls of Horizon Airlines headquarters. The brick lay jagged on the lobby floor below, a spark that ignited chaos. Bottles and rocks followed, shattering more windows. The crowd's hate a tidal wave, crashing against the building. She belongs in jail, not here, a man bellowed, his voice slurred with rage as he waved a sign scrawled with slurs. James grabbed his phone, barking orders to Horizon Security. Lock it down. Get Seattle PD here now. His deep voice was a thunderclap, but his eyes flickered with worry as he turned to Maya. Stay back. We'll handle this. She nodded, her jaw set, but her mind raced. Lillian's reach stretched from a prison cell, her venom undeterred by bars. Outside, Detective Ray Salazar screeched into the parking lot, his unmarked car skidding to a halt as he leapt out. Glock drawn, he traced Lillian's burner phone after Nora's confession, piecing together this final strike. His dark eyes narrowed as he spotted the ringleader, a wiry man in a red cap, hurling a Molotov cocktail toward the entrance. Drop it, Ray shouted, his voice cutting through the din as he tackled the man, the bottle rolling harmlessly across the asphalt. Backup arrived, squad cars flooding the scene, officers spilling out with batons raised. The mob faltered, some scattering under Ray's command, others arrested as their signs crumpled underfoot. Ray shoved the ringleader into cuffs, wrenching a phone from his pocket. Lillian's text glowed on the screen. Hit Horizon HQ. Make it big. He radioed dispatch, his tone grim. It's Hayes. Get a team to her cell. Inside, Maya watched from the office window, Elijah's cries softening as she rocked him, her dark eyes tracing the police lights flashing below. The mob's fury dwindled, their chants fading into curses as Ray's team restored order. James joined her, his hand steady on her shoulder. They're done. She's got nothing left, he said, his voice firm but laced with exhaustion. Maya's lips curved into a faint smile, her resolve hardening. She thought she'd break us one last time. I'm ending it. She turned to her desk, drafting an emergency memo. Horizon stands firm. Hate loses today. The staff rallied, screens across the building flashing her words, a defiant stand against Lillian's storm. Back in Tacoma, guards stormed Lillian's cell, her burner phone clattering to the floor as they pinned her arms. You can't stop me, she screamed, her pale face twisted with rage as they confiscated the device, her final gambit exposed. The TV looped Maya's press conference, her banner blade in Lillian's chest. Ray's evidence, Nora's testimony, the hitman's confession, now this text, sealed her fate tighter, her empire of hate reduced to a smoldering ruin. Lillian slumped against the wall, her defiance flickering out, but her eyes glinted with a promise. She'd never surrender, not fully. In Seattle, Maya exhaled, the skyline calm again, Elijah asleep in her arms. The storm had passed, but she knew Lillian's venom lingered, a shadow she'd face one last time. The glass tower of Horizon Airlines headquarters gleamed under a rare Seattle sun, its sleek lines cutting a bold silhouette against the Puget Sound a month after Lillian Hayes' final storm. Inside, Maya Brooks sat at the head of a polished boardroom table, her navy suit sharp, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun that mirrored her resolve. Her 6-month-old son, Elijah, played in a corner with Keisha, his giggles a soft counterpoint to the hum of staff bustling beyond the doors. As CEO, Maya had spent the past 4 weeks reshaping the airline, signing orders to ban hate, firing Lillian's lingering allies, and launching a campaign to rebuild trust. The scars of her journey, slap, fire, jail, bombs, etched faint lines on her face, but her dark eyes burned with a quiet triumph. She'd turned ash into power, and today she'd closed the book on Lillian for good. The boardroom screen flickered to life, displaying a live feed from the Washington State Correctional Facility in Tacoma. Lillian Hayes' sentencing had begun. Attempted murder, conspiracy, arson, bribery, a litany of charges piling up like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb. She stood in her gray jumpsuit, her blonde hair lank, her pale face hollowed by defeat as the judge's gavel fell. Life without parole. Reporters swarmed outside, their cameras catching her final snarl as guards led her away. But Maya had a different plan. She'd requested a private visit, approved by Detective Ray Salazar, who'd handed over the last piece of evidence, Lillian's burner phone text. James Carter stood beside her, his 6'4" frame steady, his deep voice low. You don't have to do this, he said, his bandaged arm a fading reminder of their fight. Maya shook her head, her voice firm. I need her to see me. One last time. The drive to Tacoma was silent. Elijah asleep in his car seat, James at the wheel. Maya's mind churned. Lillian's slap had sparked this war, her hate a wildfire that had burned everything Maya loved. Yet here she was, not just surviving but thriving, the CEO of the airline Lillian had ruled with an iron sneer. The prison's steel gates clanged open, and Maya stepped into the visitation room, a stark box of concrete and glass. Lillian sat chained to a table, her pale eyes glinting with a flicker of the old venom as Maya entered alone, her footsteps echoing. You, Lillian hissed, her voice a rasp. You think you've won? Maya met her gaze unflinching and sat across from her, the table a cold divide between victor and vanquished. I didn't come to gloat, Maya said, her tone steady, cutting through Lillian's snarl. I came to end this. She slid a photo across the table, Elijah in her arms at the press conference, Horizon's logo behind them. Lillian's hands twitched, her chains rattling as she stared at the image. Her empire's crown now Maya's. You tried to take everything, Maya continued, her voice rising with quiet fire. My family, my home, my life. But I'm still here, and you're not. Lillian's pale face contorted, her chained hands slamming the table as the photo of Elijah and Maya burned into her vision. You don't deserve it, she spat, her voice cracking with desperation, a final gasp of the tyrant she'd been. That seat was mine. First class, Horizon, all of it. Her eyes welled, not with remorse but with rage, the last embers of a fire that had consumed her. Maya leaned forward, her dark eyes piercing, her voice a blade of calm. You made it about seats, about skin, about who you thought belonged. I made it about survival, and I won. She paused, letting the weight settle, then softened her tone, a flicker of something unexpected crossing her face. I forgive you, Lillian, not because you deserve it, but because I won't carry your hate anymore. Lillian froze, her snarl faltering as tears spilled down her cheeks, unbidden and raw. I'm sorry, she choked out, the words tumbling like broken glass, her defiance shattering under Maya's gaze. It wasn't redemption, too late for that, but a crack in her armor, a glimpse of the woman buried beneath the venom. Maya stood, her silhouette steady against the fluorescent glare, and turned away, leaving the photo on the table. Goodbye, she said, her voice a quiet thunder as she walked out, the door clanging shut behind her. Lillian slumped, her sobs echoing in the empty room, her world reduced to chains and concrete, while Maya stepped into the light. Back at Horizon, Maya returned to find a surprise waiting. A letter from Tasha Green slipped under her office door. She tore it open, her breath catching as she read, Raise $10,000 from strangers online, your livestream army, to rebuild your home. You're not alone. A check fluttered out, signed by Tasha, her nurse's scrawl a testament to the bonds forged in hell. Maya's eyes welled, her fingers brushing Elijah's curls as he giggled in Keisha's arms. James joined her, his deep voice soft with awe. They see you, Maya. All of them. She nodded, the weight of her journey lifting, replaced by a warmth she hadn't felt since the slap that started it all. That evening, Maya stood on the rebuilt porch of their new Renton home, the rose bushes replanted, the siding fresh and white. Elijah slept in her arms, James beside her, the skyline glowing gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. She'd faced Lillian's war, slap, smear, mob, fire, jail, hitman, and turned each blow into a step upward. Now, as CEO, she'd banned hate from Horizon, rewritten its soul, and found peace in the ashes. The letter from Tasha, the forgiveness she'd offered Lillian, it wasn't just victory, it was closure, a middle finger to the hate that had tried to crush her, and a hand extended to those who'd lifted her up. We belong, she whispered to Elijah, her voice a vow, the first seat hers not by chance but by right. The world stretched before her, vast and unbroken, a legacy born from defiance and love.